Just don't care for the whole vampire thing, never really have. You take that and you combine it with the fact that this is a really, really slow paced movie, just moves at a glacial pace, and you kind of have the recipe for something that's incredibly boring. I loved it. I absolutely loved it.
So, Eric,
Tig,
you watched the 2008 Swedish love/horror Let the Right One In.
yes, I did.
Instead of asking you if you liked it or not, I'm more curious about if it was what you expected it to be.
It was not what I expected it to be. I did have somewhere lodged in the back of my brain that it had something to do with vampires. And of course, the name also is suggestive of that as well. I thought this was going to be more of a kind of this very suspenseful, like we're being stalked by people or creatures outside the house kind of thing. And for some reason, that's the kind of movie that I thought it was. So this was not at all what I expected.
Jag vill också vara i fred.
Gå hem då.
Gå hem själv, jag har bott här längre än du.
When it comes to horror, I tend to like to watch the landmark pictures, the really well done movies, the important movies, but I'm not an aficionado by any means. I've seen all the major and important horror movies, and I do enjoy a really good horror movie, but I don't go out of my way to see them. When it comes to horror tropes and the sort of horror basics, by far my least favorite are vampires and vampire related things. Just don't care for the whole vampire thing, never really have. You take that and you combine it with the fact that this is a really, really slow paced movie, just moves at a glacial pace, and you kind of have the recipe for something that's incredibly boring. I loved it. I absolutely loved it. When I first got done watching the picture, I was like, oh, that was very good. I really enjoyed that a lot. But I just really haven't stopped thinking about it since. Just sort of turning it over in my mind and chewing on it and really kind of absorbing what I saw. And there was just so much I liked about this film. I think it did so many things right. I think it defied expectations in so many excellent ways. I think it presented new twists on the genre, or a new way to present genre tropes in really interesting ways. But most of all, the thing that I think I liked most about it is the fact that, despite the fact that it concerns a vampire and vampirism and all these vampire tropes, it's not a movie about vampires. To me, I kind of took this more about this is a picture of about two young people grappling with trauma, with childhood trauma, and it's them finding peace in one another. And of course, Oskar wants some romance as well, but that's because he's a 12-year-old boy. But really, ultimately, it's about these two young people coming to grips with their shared childhood trauma. Because though Ellie might be a vampire, and as she implies, she's been a vampire for quite some time, she also says, which I think is a really interesting take on this, she also says that she's been 12 for a very long time. I really like that idea that despite the fact that she is undead, but despite the fact in this take on the sort of vampire mythos, she's still at heart and at soul, and even in her mind, she's still a 12-year-old.
Yeah, that was a fun twist in the movie when you find out that she's older.
Yeah, she really clicks with Oskar right away, because that very first scene when they first meet out in the yard, which incidentally has an amazing, very subtle special effect, which as soon as I saw that, I was like, oh boy, this filmmaker really knows what he's doing. But in that very first scene, right, this is when Oskar is out and he's sort of he's doing his version of Robert De Niro's mirror scene from Taxi Driver, and then she brings that up much later in the film where she quotes what he was saying. She says, these are the first words that I ever heard you speak. Reading between the lines, what she's actually saying is, I heard you talking about this trauma that you've been through and these difficulties that you're going through, and I recognize the kindred spirit. In this world, vampirism and vampires are not a sexy thing. They're not a magic thing. It's an affliction. It's a disease. The only other person that we see in the movie who becomes a vampire, hates it to the point where she practically immediately commits suicide or has somebody.
Yeah, she asks for the
kill her.
curtains to be opened.
Yeah, which is an amazing scene. I
Yeah.
love that. And I love that whole idea that it wasn't like she became a monster or something. She was like, this sucks. This is terrible. What have I become?
Yeah, I feel like vampires became very Americanized over the decades, where they became sexual, where in Europe, it seems like they stayed what they always were since the beginning. They were sort of cursed creatures. It's not a blessing. I liked how Ellie has that sort of older man that helps her, that does all the killing for her. But it's interesting that the ending of this movie is sort of sad because Oskar replaces that guy for her. I forget, there's like a term for the person who helps the vampire. They're sort of, they want to be a vampire, or they're kind of stuck like being part of that, and he does all the help. He kills the people for her, and then he screws up the job. He deforms himself so he doesn't get caught, then offers himself to her, and then she gets rid of him, and now she needs a new person. And at the end of the movie, that's Oskar. So you sort of know how Oskar's life is really going to end up.
Yeah.
Which makes you kind of think about the fact that, is she sincere with Oskar, or has this been going on? Like, was that the same thing that went on with the older guy who was probably her age when it started?
Well, I was just going to point out that other bit of tragedy behind the story is the fact that Oskar will eventually, and pretty quickly, outgrow her. He will, because she's going to remain at that age, whereas he won't. There is a darker aspect to it that didn't fully make the movie, though it is briefly hinted at in one scene, and that is reading up on it. In the original book that this was based on, Ellie's caretaker was a pedophile. He was watching over her for more reasons than just because he was a nice, caring guy taking care of her. And you do briefly get a suggestion that there's something darker at play. There's a scene very late in the movie where Oskar catches a glimpse of some scars that she has in a delicate place. And that's kind of suggestive that maybe there's something more going on. It's also kind of a hint at something that was apparently in the original book that was dropped for the movie. Well, I'm sorry, it wasn't dropped for the movie. They hint at it throughout the movie, but only very subtly. And that's that Ellie was not originally a girl. She was, according to the original novel, she was turned into a vampire in the late 1800s. And at the time, she was a young boy who was castrated.
Oh, okay.
So I guess the director in the picture sort of tried to portray her as in a slightly androgynous way. And one way they did that apparently was that wasn't the actress's voice in the movie.
Slå tillbaka mer än vad du vågar. Då slutar de.
They dubbed her voice throughout the entire movie with somebody who had a slightly deeper, richer voice, just to sort of blur it a little bit.
Yeah, blur the lines.
Which was kind of an interesting choice.
Yeah, because she does say at one point that she says, "I'm not a girl," but the implication is that she means that she's a vampire.
Yeah. She repeats that a couple of times. Just flat out says, "I'm not a girl," and I took that initially to mean as well that she's not a girl. No, she's a vampire. It's a different thing. But I guess those are sort of remnants of what's left over from the original story.
That's a weird twist, knowing that the book sounds insane. The book must be pretty crazy compared to the movie.
It sounds pretty dark, but here's the thing. The author of the book is also the one who wrote the adapted screenplay for the movie. These changes all basically come from him. And one thing I really enjoyed about it was that much of the movie was so opaque. They really don't hold your hand. You're never really told this is what's going on, or this is who this person is, or this is what their connections are, or anything like that. They really just trust the audience to piece these things together. Everything from Ellie's caretaker, what he's doing, and what those murders are initially about. I mean, you spend the first half an hour just sort of trying to put those puzzle pieces together.
That's what made the movie fun, was that the lines were all blurred the whole time. You were always sort of in the dark about everything that was going on. The only sure thing is that Oskar gets picked on.
And I thought that was really effective for the nature of the story, because still the heart of the picture is in Oskar, who is kind of innocent, and also, I mean, he doesn't really know much about the world, how the world works, or anything, anything like that. Us as viewers, as the audience, it allows us to more easily sink into Oscar's state of mind and have that same feeling of being just a little bit lost.
I enjoyed that there was sort of a separate story going on with the friends that are basically being picked off one at a time,
Yeah.
who are like outside of the story and their lives are just being destroyed by
Yes.
her. It's such a crazy, like, sad but almost comical kind of thing where these people are just going out drinking and one of them gets picked off and then another one gets picked off, and it's just like,
Yeah, absolutely. I really enjoyed that as well. You kind of got full stories for all these people, despite the fact that you barely like it's not long. They don't take up a lot of screen time, but just the little bits that you get, it's actually very similar to the picture that we just watched, Rear Window,
yeah.
in that way, where you just get these little tiny snippets of their lives that unfold throughout the course of the movie. Though, of course, in this case, they're a lot more intertwined with what's going on with Oscar and Ellie, because, like you said, they're also getting picked off, or in one case, being turned into a vampire.
Yeah.
All of it leading up to a climax that really, I mean, you see coming practically from them from the moment you realize what Ellie is, and she makes a comment, basically telling Oscar that he has to stand up for himself and that she can protect him if necessary. So right there, like, okay, yes,
Yeah, she's gonna take care of it for him. Though I was shocked how it was taken care of.
Oh my God. This is, despite being a horror picture, for anyone who hasn't watched it and they're just watching this episode, it is not a gory picture. Not even, like even the scenes of her sort of feeding as a vampire are generally just filmed with, you see the back of her head on someone's neck, or that sort of thing, and then maybe you see a little like blood makeup on her, that sort of thing. But there's not really much in the way of gore or anything. There's one scene where she bleeds from her ears and her eyes and all that, which is a brilliant scene, incidentally. That's a play on, there's that idea that in order for a vampire to enter your home, you have to invite them in. Hence the title, Let the Right One In.
Yeah, let the right one in. Yeah, they have to be invited.
Yeah, and so there's this really great scene, which I really loved, this play on that aspect of vampires, where Oscar refuses to let her in, and he asks, like, well, what happens? Can't you look? There's nothing here. Can't you just walk in? So to prove a point, she does walk in, and within a couple of moments, she's basically just like rotting away, just bleeding away, which was really cool. But then that climactic scene at the pool, at the gym, it's really well built up. Again, it's coming. The moment Oscar gets that phone call saying, "Oh, come to practice tonight," you know what it's leading up to. The director spends lots of time building up towards it in a really great way. And then the way the actual tearing apart of the bullies is handled, which is fantastic because it's all off camera. Oscar's being held down under the water. The kid is suffering. He's on the verge of death. And we just get these really terrific special effect shots of like the one kid with the sneakers who they had been showing repeatedly, in the previous minutes, being dragged through the pool, and then the head dropping in, and then the arm being severed and dropping in. And you never actually see what she's doing. You don't see all this stuff happening. It's on the peripheries. Just so well done.
I read, after watching it, I read online that it was all mapped out exactly what was happening. So it's funny that it was planned. It wasn't just randomness. It was legitimately planned out exactly how they were killed.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. Especially with this director. I'm not familiar with his work, but now I want to sort of explore it a little further, because he made so many really great directorial choices throughout this movie, especially when it comes to depicting violence and horror. Very often what he does, he's got the camera pulled back. It's a long shot. It's a static shot. The camera's not moving, and it's set back, to the equivalent of maybe 30 or 40 yards or something like that, so that the audience is watching these things unfold from a distance. It doesn't have that modern feel of like you're right in the middle of it and there's fast action and fast cuts. No, instead you're kind of like a voyeur looking at it from afar, and that makes it a lot more unsettling. It's kind of like looking out your windows at night, the shadows in the woods or the alley across the street, and thinking maybe you see something horrible, but you're not quite sure. And it lets your imagination fill in a lot of blanks. And that was, those were really effective choices.
Yeah, it's more real. Especially anytime under the bridge, whenever they were under the bridge, those, like what you're saying, those shots, those distant shots. So you feel like you were just strolling up and you like see something happening from a distance, and it makes it scarier.
Yeah, absolutely. That was really well done. And the first scene I noticed it was early on when Ellie's caretaker grabs the first guy in order to take him into the woods and kill him. And that was just brilliantly staged because this camera's set far back and there's sort of a path that runs horizontally across the screen. You have some trees that are in the way, and it's like you're sitting back a little bit and actually watching this take place in front of you. When the other walker gets attacked by the caretaker and he's knocked out, the camera never moves, the music doesn't surge, there aren't any cuts or anything like that. You just watch this slow, horrible thing happen sort of between the trees. Just fantastically done. Throughout this picture, I mean, the camera very rarely moves, and when it does, it only moves a little, and it's always for a specific purpose. It's always very effective. That's one thing that stood out to me because I just recently rewatched The Force Awakens, Star Wars The Force Awakens, which is directed by J.J. Abrams, and the goddamn camera never stops fucking moving in that movie. Look, there's nothing wrong. Look, camera motion is great when done effectively. Akira Kurosawa was a master at that sort of thing. Stuff like Seven Samurai is a master class of like how to move the camera really smartly. But J.J. Abrams in The Force Awakens is just willy-nilly for no reason at all. It's just, two people are just standing there talking and the camera's like swinging around for no damn reason. Everything is this, oh, look how dramatic and amazing we're being right now.
It's too many toys.
It's too many toys. It's wasted. It's exhausting. It's just absolutely exhausting, and it doesn't actually add anything to the picture. Whereas here, and Let the Right One In, anytime that camera is moving, it's very specifically to put you in a scene or to highlight something, to bring your attention to something. For the most part, the camera's static through a lot of it.
Let the camera tell the story. Don't spend all your time throwing it all over the place, trying to force it to tell the story.
When the camera's swinging all around like that, it takes me out because I'm no longer really an observer. I'm on a roller coaster ride. And I know it's a slight tangent, but I do feel like it kind of plays into the point that I'm trying to make here about the director's camera work with Let the Right One In. Here, because the camera was so still, you are there. You're in this little Swedish village with Oskar and the other characters. And it really allows the mood, that oppressive mood that lies over everything, to sort of settle down and sink in on you, and gives you an opportunity to absorb the trauma that both Oskar and Ellie are grappling with. So, again, just one of these directorial decisions that I thought made this so effective. And it's one of the reasons why I'm still thinking about this movie, and have been all day since watching it last night.
That's great, though. That's great when that happens, when you spend a couple days thinking about something you watched. It's like what's fun about it.
This was a great choice, and I'm glad that you nudged me toward it. I was familiar with it having a good reputation, and it was one of these things that was just sort of in the back of my mind of, maybe one day I'll see that. But it certainly wasn't on like a short list for me to watch. So it was good to get the nudge. Yeah, I'm really, really glad I saw it.
I'm glad you enjoyed it. I'm glad that we got to talk about it.
Yeah, it's good stuff.
Unlike Ice Pirates.
Yeah, that's pretty accurate. That's pretty accurate. That means it's time.
Oh boy.
I want to actually stick with the theme of suspenseful movies that we've been doing. Though I'm going to bring us a little more modern with this one. You will be watching 10 Cloverfield Lane.
No! Don't open that door! They're going to get all of us killed!
Yeah, your assignment's going to be 10 Cloverfield Lane.
Watch it and come back and have delightful conversation about it.
People who've watched Let the Right One In, comment in the comments below because we want to hear about that, as well as like vampire movie thoughts in general.
Thanks for hanging out at the movie club.